Hello, everybody, and welcome to my channel. My name is Alexa, for those of you who are new, and for my subscribers, thank you so much, and welcome back. A few of you have asked me to tell you a little bit about myself and what my story is. So that's what we're going to do today. My name is Alexa, and currently I live in England, in a very small village, about 95 miles northeast of London on the coast. Very small place. And I know I sound American, but I'm not. I was born here in England, and when I was 8, my mother remarried to an American, and we emigrated to America in 1959. So I have had a green card in the United States for 66 years, and I was just recently deported. So I've been dumped by a country. Yeah. But I lived there most of my adult life. When we immigrated to America, my stepfather was a civilian with the attached to the American military, so we didn't stay in America very long in those years. So we went to live in a lot of different countries around the world and traveled a great deal and moved a lot around the world. And so I experienced a lot of different places and different lifestyles and different things. So that's, sort of formulated my sensibilities or whatever. And then when I was 16, I had gone to boarding school, so I was a little bit more advanced than normal people going to regular school. And I decided I wanted to go to university in Los Angeles, to UCLA, because I had friends from there that I'd gone to school with, so I wanted to go there. So when I was 16 in 1966, I went to Los Angeles, and that summer prepared to go to university in the fall. And so that was, I think, my formative years, because of course, you're 16 years old, you come from a parochial background. I'd gone to an all-girls boarding school, and, you lived a sort of a coveted life and, with the nuns. So, and then you're in Los Angeles in the 60s. So yeah, it was a bit of a culture shock, and if I hadn't had a strong sense of worth, it could have been a lot worse than it was. There were issues. I mean, you're living in an adult world, and you're really just a teenager. So it yeah, you make mistakes, and I was not immune to that situation, and I did, and they were, you made some big mistakes, little mistakes, and whatever. But that was my life, and I embraced it and moved on. But in Los Angeles in the 60s was a sort of a situation where you had to be 21 to do pretty much anything. And back then in the 60s, you could go down to get a driver's license, and they did not ask you to prove, who you were for a start, and how old you were. And I wanted to get a job, and most of the jobs that you would make extra money doing required you to be 21 years old at least. And I was actually, well, at this particular time I was 17, because I've been there for a few months, and I realized I needed a part-time job to be able to do all the things I wanted to do. So I went down to the DMV, and they said, "How old are you?" So I thought, well, if I say I'm 21, they may get suspicious and want me to prove something. So I'll just say that I'm 23, because I never looked like a child back then, So I said I was 23, which made me 6 years older than I actually was, which was fine, So they gave me a driver's license, and for years I was 6 years older than I actually was. But this allowed me to get a job. And I had a friend who worked at the Playboy Club, and she said, come on, you can work for the Playboy Club. And I thought, oh, okay. And, so I went to work as a Playboy bunny. And this was great. I was a bumper pool girl. And back then, I mean, I made like buckets of money. I mean, absolutely buckets of money. But it was an experience, And you were at the Playboy Club. You were really sort of taken care of because you had a bunny mother, and you weren't sort of, it wasn't a free for all. It wasn't like you were working in some sort of like dive type club. It was rather controlled. But it was also not, your ideal situation. I mean, the outfit that you had to wear was like very restricting, and the one thing that always comes to mind for me were the fishnet stockings. The fishnet stockings and high heel shoes is a combination in life. It's like water torture. It was absolutely one of the most painful things in the world because the fishnet stockings were so different back then. It was like little bits of barbed wire cutting into your feet. It was with high heel shoes. It was absolutely terrible. But yeah, no. I'm an expert bumpable girl. But so I didn't work for the Playboy Club for very long because it was not a situation that was like really, it didn't suit my sensibilities. As I still had that English prudishness about me, and one of the things that I still to this day have is an issue with public nudity. My Christmas vacation, I just went to the spa in the hotel that was like nude. Yeah, no, not doing that. Give me a towel. It's an English thing, I think, public nudity. You just don't show your bits to the world, it's a private thing. I had a little bit of an issue with that, and going to the Playboy Mansion, back then in the 60s, and everybody was sort of like, we'll pay you lots of money, take your clothes off and take your pictures in the magazine. Nah, not happening. After, I think 18 months, I think I worked for the Playboy Club. It was not that long. You amassed quite a bit of money from that because you made more than people in huge professions back then, as most of the people that belonged to the club were very wealthy guys, and they stick like $500 down your up your little skirt or whatever. Anyway, so it was an interesting time of my life, but I went back into to university, and by this time I was getting close to the end, and I found that there were a lot of companies out there that would hire you part-time and then also pay for your university fees, which I thought, oh, it's another way to make money. So I went to work for United Airlines and their reservation department, and I worked part-time in their United Airlines reservation department, and I went to school the rest of the time, and they paid my fees, which was really great. And also, one of the side benefits of that is I got to travel. And so I got to travel a lot for free, which was one of the great things. I really enjoyed travel. I was in the west coast of California, so the area that you went to was Asia. And I really liked Japan and back then China wasn't much of an option, but there were a lot of other places. I went Fiji and Australia, New Zealand, all around. So I traveled a great deal during that time period, as much as I could, till I finished my university, and then I stayed on with United for a number of years. But back then, you got a little bit tired of traveling, and you thought, well, I need to do something else, and make a different plan for myself. So I decided to move to San Francisco, and went up to San Francisco and thought, I'll do something else. So when I was on one of the planes, I met the CEO of Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, which was a brokerage house. And they offered me a job, and I thought, okay, let's give this a go. So I did that too, and went into the financial market, and basically stayed in that for a while, and just moved around. But I was never committed too much to anything. But Morgan Stanley had a program of more education. The more education you had, the better your situation was. So I decided to go on and get a master's degree, because they wanted you to to have an economics and stuff like this. So I went, try to choose the the easiest possible route, because really, for me, education, for me personally, not everybody, but for me personally, education was in here, out there, just pass the test. Basically, that's all it was. I wasn't out there to gain knowledge. I just wanted to gain paper and credentials, but that's pretty much all it was for me. So I continued on to get all of the necessary degrees, because anything that you had behind your name was like money in your pocket. So okay, let's go for this. But that's basically how I moved on. And and because, bearing in mind that my sister says that I'm long-winded and I talk too much, I need to end this portion of my story there. So we're up to the 80s, and we'll move along further on into the rest of my life after the 80s, as it does get a lot more interesting after that. But that's enough for now, and I thank you for tuning in. And I hope that you'll come back for more on this story. Thanks so much. Bye.